that. And if you want to let people in.
It's recording. You got it. I'll let everybody in.
Okay.
Okay, so just so I know, right? On my end.
What's that?
I don't have to share anything on my end, right? You got it.
Okay. No, I'm doing the sharing.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies. How are you?
We're good.
Good.
One of us is a little nervous.
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Cindy, are people still in the waiting room?
Just have one more in the waiting room. I'm letting her in right now.
All righty. Shall I go ahead and get started then?
Go for it.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Beginning Finance Training. And let me just introduce myself. My name is Lisa Uematsu. I'm the Tax and Government Filings Consultant for 33rd District. With us, we also have the 33rd District Treasurer, Lena Wright. And we have Jocelyn Cisneros, the Financial Secretary. And we have Flora Farzad, who is our auditor. Let's see. In the chat, we have links to some of the forms that are going to be important for you as financial officers. So the first link that just says financial forms actually takes you to a page that has links to just about all the forms you will need. And then we have pulled out some specific ones that are pretty important. And I would like for us to do a poll. So Lena, can you launch that first poll, please? Oh, there we are.
And if you can see the poll, if you would start answering the questions as best you can. We're going to do it in about 30 seconds long. Just kind of give us an idea about who you are. It's going well, so I'm going to give us a few more seconds more.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I didn't realize so many units had financial secretaries.
Mm-hmm. Guess it's going to look like it's going to be about a minute long poll.
Kind of looks like we're slowing down here, so.
We good?
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, everyone. Thank you for participating. We'll have another one coming up shortly. So there you go, Lisa.
Okay, so we have a decent number of newbies. We have people who have been financial officers before this term. I'd be interested in seeing why people that have experience are in the beginning course. And that's nice that we have people who are not financial officers here, because it's really important for everyone on the board to understand the policies and procedures that we need to take care of for finance. Okay. As far as whether you have a treasurer and a financial secretary, my personal experience has been mostly the units I've been in has just been a treasurer. So my presentation may be skewed toward that. So Lena and Joe, if you see me doing that, you might jump in and with any stuff that's pertinent to financial secretary. And then we have,
I'm going to stop sharing the poll.
okay. And then we have a decent number that actually attended California State Training. And this is going to be fairly consistent with that, I hope. So, but yes, I'm glad that you guys are attending ours. Let me see here. So there's going to be a lot of information that we're presenting in a limited time. So we're going to be going pretty fast. But this is mostly just to expose you just to sort of general principles. And if you have questions, there's the handout, of course. There's actually, let me start playing this. There's you can, oopsie, I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. Alrighty, so if you're having problems at your unit where you don't know how to do something, if you report to a council, you can always ask your council for some advice. And then all of you belong to 33rd District. If you don't belong to a council or your council is not able to answer your questions, there's 33rd District. And then if there's questions that we can't answer, we can always ask California State PTA. And then also there's National PTA above that. Also, there is the toolkit. So everything that we're presenting here, there's going to be a section on it in the California State PTA toolkit, and probably in a lot more detail. So if you're having difficulty figuring stuff out based on the information we give you, then there are a lot of other resources to go to. Oops, sorry. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat. We're going to have our co-hosts kind of screening those questions, and then we'll pause after every major subject, and we'll try and answer some of the basic questions. And then if there's questions that we can't get to, which I'm sure there will be, then we'll go ahead and try and answer them all and post them on our website, okay? Also, this is gonna be a little strange because we're all in lockdown or quarantine or, you know, trying to cope with COVID. And so this presentation is basically based on what you would do in normal times, but then we'll try and put in some information as far as how you can deal with trying to get signatures or whatever if people are trying to social distance, okay? And really, all this information boils down to being accountable. You as officers and board members want to be accountable to the rest of your board and also your membership. So if you're wondering, oh, well, how should I handle a certain thing? Just make sure that you're being as accountable and transparent as possible, because it's not your money, it's not the president's money, it's not the principal's money, it belongs to your association for the good of the kids, okay? Oops. And again, I'm having issues here. Sorry, there we go. Okay, now, oh, and another thing relating back to COVID, because our schools were shut down and still are, there might be situations where PTA kind of went dormant for a while and didn't do the stuff you normally would. I mean, I know that there are some units who haven't even had their elections and may not have worked on their budget yet. So just, we understand that. Just make sure that you try and do your best to catch up to where you should be, okay? So ideally, all the stuff on this slides are in an ideal situation. Ideally, your budget committee of your incoming board, your new board, would have collaborated on a budget to propose and present to your association at the end of this, toward the end of the school year. And then during the summer is a good time to work on your plans and fine tune your budget. And then just wanted to point out this last bullet point. It seems like this presentation was actually from a fall training. So at the first association meeting of the year, the finalized budget will be approved by your board and your association. Okay. So here's a sample budget. Just wanted to point out some of the elements of the budget. You can have a beginning balance. You're going to have your income broken down into various categories. And you're going to have your expenses. A lot of times when people think of a budget, they only think of the expense side, and they think about all the great things they're going to be doing. We're going to have a carnival, we're going to have reflections, and they list all those expenses. But really you have to think about, oh, well, how are you going to pay for all of those? So you also have to take your income into account too. Okay, so once you adopt your budget and your association adopts your budget, you still don't necessarily have authorization to spend that money. Each line item needs to be released at an association before any of those monies can be spent. So here's an example of a motion on the slide. I move to release the following funds, and then you list specifically the things you are going to want to spend money on. And generally, it's a good idea to think ahead so that at your association meeting, you want to release all the funds related to items that you're going to need to spend money for between this association meeting and the next association meeting later in the year. Okay, now before you write checks, okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting frozen here. Here we go. Before you write checks, you need to make sure that there's paperwork approving it. There's this payment authorization form, which is in the toolkit, this first one on the left. And also, if you want to do one that suits your PTA better, maybe you want it simpler, maybe that makes it easier to understand, then you can go ahead and make something like the one on the right. It's very important that if you're requesting a reimbursement, that you have paperwork that documents what you've spent, a receipt or an invoice. And also the president and the secretary need to sign the payment authorization form before checks are issued.
Lisa, I might want to suggest to everybody that you try not to make your check payment authorization form too simplistic, because the auditor's going to need to, the treasurer going back. You should have like the date the check is written. I know sometimes the date entered there may be the date somebody completes the form, but it needs to be noted what date the check was written on top of the check number, the amount, etc. So, you know, try not to get it too simplistic that you forget some important information.
Thank you, Lena. Okay, you know what? I need to, excuse me here, I need to make this smaller because it's interfering here. And we'll go back to here. Okay, so for disbursements, now if you have a financial secretary, the financial secretary can help the treasurer as far as completing all the paperwork and double checking the math, making sure that there are appropriate receipts or invoices, assigning a check number, assigning a budget account number or a budget line item. Now, for every single every single check that is issued, you either need to have approval from the association or ratification from the association. So everything that you spend needs to be approved by your association, either before the fact or after the fact. And then also, you need to make sure that the approval or ratification is included in your minutes, because your minutes are your official record of the business that's been taken care of. Okay, so here's a sample form where it has a date, it's got the check number, it's got the person it's made payable to, the description, and you want to make sure that your description is detailed enough so that you know what it was spent for, what budget line item it belongs to. And so that if anyone has any questions, then it should all be there on the paper, answered on that paperwork. Okay, so once the money is released by your association, then you can write the checks for up to that budgeted amount that was released by your association. 2 signatures are required on every check. You should double check your bylaws because they should specify exactly which officers are check signers. You also want to make sure there's a part in the bylaws that specifies that check signers cannot be related by blood or marriage or living in the same household. And also you want to make sure that your auditor is not related to your check signers. You want to make sure that also that you're using a permanent ink pen, just because there's been incidences of check washing where someone takes a written PTA check and washes that ink off and then changes the payee or the amount. So make sure you use a permanent ink pen or a gel pen that is specifically made to guard against fraud. Okay. So here's some things we want to avoid when we're writing checks. You notice the check is payable to the president. And oh, look, she's also signed the check. We don't want people signing off on their own reimbursements. Same thing with our treasurer, Andy Warhol. So that's the main reason why you have 3 allowed signers generally in your bylaws. So make sure that your bylaws specify 3 or more signers. Okay. Now, in addition, once you've written the check, you have all the paperwork, but then you want to make sure you have all that information collected in one place. So there are different ways that you can record your information. There's PTA EZ, which is an online financial software. It is a subscription software So depending on how much you typically gross, then the charges are on a sliding scale. Oh, actually, and I should say that it's no longer known as PTA EZ. It's actually my PTEZ. But it is pretty useful because once you enter all of your information, then it's very good at spitting out reports based on your budget line items or whatever beginning and end dates you want. So if you are comfortable with computers, you're kind of a little bit tech savvy, or you're familiar with QuickBooks or Quicken, then you might consider looking into PTEZ. Okay, and then here's the treasurer's ledger. We usually call it the green book. And so that is something where, you know, if you're more of a old school pen and paper kind of person, then you can use this and keep track of everything manually. The treasurer's ledger that is available through 33rd District, it has things broken down into category that will pretty much match up with the annual financial report that we ask you to complete. And then also it kind of lines up with the tax requirements when you do your tax filings. Oops. And then if you want to do it on Excel, then that's fine too. You just need to make sure that you print out, have hard copies for the minutes, and that so you can have a permanent record. Okay, and now, maybe now is a good time for questions.
Okay, so we have a question, and the answer, of course, is the secretary has to sign the check request before the check is written, because they were asking our secretary signs it after the checks go out. And it's because they have to verify that funds have been released, the budget's been approved, the activity's been approved. So the secretary is supposed to sign that verifying that information, all those actions have been taken.
And that
I'm
it's
sorry.
recorded, and it's recorded in the minutes.
Right. And another question for the budget, will it be more flexible this year due to COVID? I'm sure that the programs we normally have may not take place. And I mean, if you guys want to answer, but the budget is whatever you want it to be. We know it's not going to be the same, you know, as before. You're not going to have any probably in-person fundraising or activities. So whatever your board and association approves as a budget that works for you this year, then that's what it is. It doesn't have to reflect, well, we've always done this.
Right, your budget never has to reflect what you've always done. You know, I mean, if you have good programs from previous years, then yes, obviously go ahead and bring them back. But then again, the circumstances that we're under now, then family night, you know, back to school night, those kind of events, field trips, assemblies, those are not likely to happen. So this is actually a year to kind of start from scratch and think about the things that can be done with social distancing.
And then the last question I have is, if you use my PTEZ, do you have to still handwrite all the forms? And I think you're talking about check requests and cash verification forms. Yes. Right?
I guess I'm a little unsure of what the question is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you still need those forms. You still need something.
I'm the one that asked that question.
Okay.
Not necessarily the forms of like reimbursement, but just for everything else, the accountability. Does it still? Can we just run the records from that program? And obviously, we'll have some that are still handwritten, like the reimbursements, or you know, when we get money that we have to deposit those those forms, but anything else, could we still use the format, the software?
The software is your recording. The software, whether it's My PTEZ or Quicken or Excel, those are your record keeping documents or your record keeping formats. But PTA still have to complete payment authorizations with all the original receipts attached. In the time of COVID where we're not meeting, those can be physically dropped on the porch of the treasurer. They can be created in a fillable PDF form so that you can complete those. You can send them to the chairperson for to approve of the initial expense, and then they can then be signed by the president and the recording secretary, and then the treasurer collects everybody's PDF completed forms, but the original receipts still have to be delivered to the treasurer, that the treasurer then collects all those.
Another question that we have is, does PTEZ software offer a ledger to record expenditures? And if we're talking about the ledger, those are assigning receipts and disbursements to tax categories. And so they do, but it costs more. There's an add-on fee. I think it's like $100 for the tax worksheet for the federal and $80 for the state. Otherwise, that's pretty much, in my opinion, the only manual report that has to be prepared is the ledger, in which you would prepare the UTAR off the ledger.
Okay. Are there any more questions? We seem to be rolling on time.
Maybe it's the chat.
Okay. Let's see. Now we're going to move on to receipts and deposits. And just want to double check. I think Jocelyn Cisneros is going to take care of that. Are you ready, Joe?
I am.
Okay. Oops.
I have no idea.
Okay.
Well, she came down, just her. What? Just the girl came down.
Okay.
Somebody needs to mute themselves.
The adult.
County Council, can you mute yourself, please? Thank you.
Okay,
All
so I'm going to start with the deposits and receipts. So it says Georgia, the financial secretary, is busy collecting and counting and depositing money in the PTA bank account. How does Georgia receive the money? Georgia, some lady just walked up to me and said she wanted to be a member. Here, take this money for her membership. That is not how we should be able to take money. You just don't take it from anybody who just walks up and gives you money. So next it says, how should Georgia receive the money? With a cash verification form. So it says, hey, Georgia, we had several people pay for membership. I've attached a cash verification, or the cash and checks to this cash verification form. I signed it as membership chair, and the first vice president also counted the money and signed the form too. So handling of the receipts, the most important thing is we want to remember that anytime we deal with money, we want to make sure we count money on a cash verification form. So we need to have all the monies that received were on that verification form for whatever event it was. All monies must be counted by 2 PTA members, with one being officer or chairman, and the 2 should not be related by blood, marriage, or reside in the same household. The auditor should never count monies received. Money must be counted before leaving the school. The cash verification form must be signed by all persons counting the funds. The cash verification, I'm sorry, I read that already. The number of memberships must be reconciled and listed on the form along with any donations received. So at the bottom of your cash verification form, you will have membership dues. You will put how many memberships there were, add the total that your unit cost of dues, and then you will add the donations separately for your grand total. So you will list those all separately. And then the financial secretary must verify the totals and countersign the form when taking custody of the money. If you do not have a financial secretary, the treasurer verifies that information.
Oops. Okay. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
So the event is over, it's late, and Georgia is tired. So it says, Georgia looks around. Only the custodians are left, and they are locking up. Over walks her husband and 8-year-old son. She says to herself, well, my husband is here, so he can sign the cash verification form, and I guess it's never too late to teach little Johnny how to count the cash. That is not correct because they reside in the same household, and nobody under the 18 should be able to count money, and especially if they are related in any such way or form. So counting money and making deposits. Make sure you plan ahead for any event you have, especially night events, because that's where it comes into play. People that host carnivals or after school events, family nights, if you guys charge for any of those events. Make arrangements for the event committee members and other board members to be available to count funds at the end of the event. And then you can contact your bank to see if they accept night deposits. A lot of banks have the night deposits where you can go to the bank and drop it in a slot in their bank and they will count it the next morning. So if you're putting money in the school safe, follow chain of custody protocol and make a copy and picture the cash verification form before money is put in the safe. So you'll need to check with your principal when you're doing that to make sure that they allow the money to be put in the safe overnight if you choose to do that. Now, making deposits. All receipts must be deposited in the bank as soon as possible. Only PTA funds are to be deposited in PTA accounts. No commingling of funds, which means if you have a school event that's not PTA related, it should not go into your PTA account. Vice versa, if you have PTA money, it should not go into the school account. So all your accounts should be accounted for separately. You prepare your deposit slips in duplicate, the original for the bank and the other for the treasurer's records. So as most of you guys know, and if you're not familiar with that, please let us know, but all your deposit slips should be duplicate. So you should have the white copy and the yellow copy, and you guys keep the yellow copy for your records. Checks must be marked for deposit only with the PTA account, and the endorsement stamp must be safeguarded. Most of our units should already have a stamp that's made that's gone to the account that you just stamp the back of the checks. If you guys do not have a stamp already made for your unit, you can look into it at your bank. A lot of different
Office Depot.
Office Depot, they do that. You can request to have your stamp made there. But every unit should have a stamp already pre-made instead of having to write that information on the back of your check. So if you do not, again, please reach out to any of us on how to get that information and how to get it done for you guys, because that's going to be the easiest way, especially our elementaries who receive a lot of checks. You can develop and use a system to identify checks should they be returned, unpaid, NSF from the bank. So your unit should already know how to collect that money if you receive a notification from the bank that the check has been returned and has not been paid. You can call the local police watch commander for an escort if you're concerned about transferring a large deposit to the bank. So it happens a lot of mostly our elementary sites where they do the after school events. You have a large amount and you're not safe taking that to the night deposit by yourself. You can call the watchman, not the 911 number, but you can call them and they will escort you to the bank where you can safely make that deposit for you guys. You will deposit your receipts and financial service duplicate receipts should be attached to the cash verification forms and retained for audit. So all cash verification forms and all the deposit receipts should be kept. So when it comes time for audit, you guys have record of every deposit that was made in every cash verification form. It will keep track of the cash and checks that were coming in and out from two people being signed.
Joe, before we leave this slide, I wanted to go up to the top where it talks about preparing your deposit slips.
Yes.
It's also an extremely good idea that when the financial secretary or the treasurer goes to the bank, that they ask for duplicate receipts so that the treasurer gets a copy, and then the financial secretary, if that's what you have, would keep a copy attached to that cash verification form that shows that they proved, that they deposited the money that had been verified before.
Yes,
So.
Lena brought up a good point. So if you guys go to the bank, you can always ask for 2 receipts. And if you have a financial secretary, that's really important because you'll have one for your record and you'll give one to your treasurer to keep track of. That is what we do. So for example, at 33rd, I make the deposits. I ask for 2 receipts. I attach one to my copy and I give one to Elena for her to keep for her records to show, because it's all paper record at this point. So it's really good. So if you guys do have that, a financial, please ask for 2 receipts so you guys each have a copy of that.
And I'm just going to jump in right now regarding the bullet point of identifying checks should they be returned unpaid. And that might be a little unclear to people. So if you're having a fundraiser and someone bounces a check to you, and often it's not necessarily a student's parent, but it could be their aunt or their grandma or a coworker of the parent. So if you're collecting checks from fundraisers, it's a good idea to maybe put the student's name on the memo field or something so that you'll be able to contact the writer of the check and let them know that they need to pay you back for the check and also any bank fees that you may incur.
Yeah, so as she said, like when you receive it, checks and cash, it usually comes in a one envelope with the child's name. So at least note that child's name or room number, because like she said, not all checks always come from the parent. There could be multiple checks were in, and that is a good way to keep track of who, if a check was bounced for any reason, where you need to collect the money from.
Okay. Oops. All righty.
So recording income in the ledger. So you guys will need to be I hope everybody's keeping a ledger of your receipts. It's either called the Green Book that you can collect from the PTA store, or you can reach out to your council. Sometimes they have extra books on hand, or the district has them as well. But you can also keep it online through Excel. But you always have to keep a ledger of your receipts and the deposits as well. So there is a sample of the electronic ledger that you can see on the screen. You will have your receipts and income, and you will put the date that you received it, from where, what it came from, the total amount, and then you will break it down by the category that it's based off of. So if it's fundraising, you'll put that money in fundraising. If it's student welfare, so you will break it down that way. But every treasurer that does this, they should be keeping a ledger of some sort, whether it's the Green Book or whether it's electronic ledger. But you need to be keeping track, because that's going to help you later on at the end of the year when you need to finalize your year-end stuff.
And for some reason, we don't have a PTA easy, my PT easy slide, but then obviously you can record your receipts and deposits there too. And no matter what method you use to record your income or your expenses, just make sure that you have enough detail so that you'll be able to categorize it, so that you'll be able to answer any questions that people may have. And I think it's time for questions about receipts and deposits. Do we have any in the chat?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So someone want to elaborate on the 4th point on NSF checks. If we can go back to that slide on NSF checks.
Is this slide, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it said, they said, what is the system? Develop and use a system to identify checks should they be returned unpaid. What does that system look like?
Well, that's kind of what, when I jumped in and said, oh, well, if you make sure you put some kind of identifying, like if you put the student's name there, then you know that you should be able to contact that person who bounced the check to you through that student. So that's
Okay.
that's what we mean. Nothing system.
Nothing elaborate.
Yeah.
There was also another question about, can they require phone numbers be on checks? No, you can just, as you're receipting in the, let's say, gift wrap, you would note on the gift wrap order form that it was paid by a check, and you would, maybe make, again, reference to the student's room number, etc. But on the check, you would make sure that, does this order form have a phone number? We can contact them in case it does come back NSF. So, you can always make notes on the checks or on the invoice or the payment the order for, the item. So no, you don't have to require people only give you checks with phone numbers, but you can sure ask them to put that on there, and then you would cross-reference to the form that that they're completing.
And then we have a question. Due to COVID-19 circumstances and lack of access to the school, where do we keep any monies collected by the PTA?
Who's going to handle that one?
That's sort of yes, obviously a lot of these slides, they're referring to pre-COVID times. And so, yes, some of this is going to, adapting to social distancing and perhaps volunteers not being allowed even on the school grounds is going to require us thinking outside the box. And I was actually hoping to attend California State PTA's fundraising training that will be next month to hopefully answer some of those questions, because yeah, I am not sure how we're going to handle that. And so we're hoping to get some guidance from CAPTA. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that.
I don't, but going back to old school, if for some reason, and there shouldn't be many reasons why monies cannot get deposited to the bank immediately. It does take some forethought, as we said earlier. You need to plan ahead. You can call your local watch commander for an escort. The insurance company will not pay on a loss if you have not adequately followed a chain of custody on the money, meaning money has been counted, verified by 2 people, cash verification form has been completed. Pre-COVID, again, if for some reason nobody could get it to the bank, it's placed in a safe. It should never be placed in a school safe because there's too many people that might have access to the school safe. So some PTAs have had their own PTA safe, but again, it's the chain of custody on the money. If it is, if it's documented that there's only 3 people that have access to that money, or access to that safe, then you seal it and initial it, and it's clear the money was placed in the safe. Then somebody comes the next day to get the money out. It's clear. So there are some tighter regulations, tighter procedures to go through, but I would, especially now in COVID and us never being, at least right now, not able to go on campus, we should never even have to get to the question of what if we can't get to the bank. Someone has just posted about using a bank bag or a night deposit. So we used to use, when I was in the elementary school, we did have a locked night deposit bag. You can get a ATM for deposit only card. Those can happen, but it has to be secured so that no cash withdrawals can come out of the ATM, because we don't have ATM cards for disbursements. So you can ask your bank for a ATM deposit, but then you have to have other security measures taking place about making sure you get duplicate receipts to prove the money went into the bank, etc. So there are some ways to work around it, but
Well, there is the question, do we have to make copies of checks before they're deposited? I would say no.
And I would say depends on, again, back in the day, you're running gift wrap and you've got thousands and thousands of checks? No, but just as soon as we say no, you're going to get one, you're going to get a check that gets returned from the bank, and you may not be able to verify which of that thousands checks bounced. You had, $20, $30 checks. So you would then have to secure a copy from the bank, which they may end up charging you.
The bank will automatically send a copy of the dishonored check and with a notice to the treasurer, whoever's address they have on the bank. And for online deposits, there's copies of the checks also. So that didn't used to be, and so that's helpful, is that there are copies on the deposit on online banking, and they do send a copy of the check with the notice to the address listed on the bank account.
So that sort of goes back to this bullet point number 4 about developing and using a system to identify checks. If the bank is going to send you back a copy of that bounced check, then any identifying clues that you can put in the memo field should help you with that. So that sort of lowers the need to make copies of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Flora, do you want to talk about, there was a question about Venmo/PayPal to collect money.
Venmo is individuals. It's not a company. So PayPal is, but as far as Venmo and them, no. That's a person-to-person kind of payment processor. PayPal, yes, a PayPal account can be set up with the school and with the bank account, not with the school, but with the PTA. And a bank account is associated with that PayPal account, which should be the PTA e-commerce account that you've established. And PayPal should be reported to the board and association as a separate treasurer report at the meetings, because in PayPal, and I think there may be an option to automatically draw down, but there's the option of drawing down at the treasurer's discretion of whatever, whenever the treasurer makes the drawdown. And so we have to be more careful about that, because there was a situation where the treasurer wouldn't draw down the money because the PTA didn't need it, and that's not the option that you should have. It should be drawn down every month and reported to the board and association, the amount that went through the PayPal account collected and the amount drawn down. It should be 0 at the end of the month.
Okay. And
now Lisa, that you're, oh, go ahead.
You know what? I think it's time to move on. So
okay, there was a question about categories that maybe once we get to the tax forms might answer this person's question.
Okay, alrighty. So, oops, again. Alrighty, so financial reports. So it's not enough for you to be collecting all this information. You need to be presenting it to your board and also to your association. So here's a sample of a financial secretary's report. Again, if your unit does not have a financial secretary, then this information should be included on your treasurer's report somehow. But you can see how it details when the receipts came in, and then how much it was, and then what category it belongs to. So any report that you have, a financial secretary's report or a treasurer's report, you want to make sure you have enough detail so that your board members or your PTA members can know where the money is coming from and where the money is going. Okay, and then here's another one here. Okay, so you want to make sure that you present the reports monthly at all of your board meetings, and then also at the association meetings. You would probably, the association meeting reports would cover a longer period because you may not have an association meeting every month. So if it's been 3 months since your last association meeting, then your financial secretary's report is going to cover that period since the previous report. Okay. Let's see. And then treasurer's report. This one is actually a sample that's available on capta.org, the California State PTA website. So again, like the financial secretary's report, you're going to present it monthly at the board meetings and then also at the association meetings. So your treasurer's report, you need to make sure that it includes a beginning balance for the period, the total receipts, and then itemized disbursements. Also, the receipts need to be itemized either on the financial secretary's report or the treasurer's report. And then balance on hand as of the end date. And then if you have more than one bank account, perhaps you have a checking account and a savings account, then you will also do a separate report for that account. And it's a good idea to provide a copy of your treasurer's report to your council regularly so that they can just double check and make sure that you're preparing it correctly, that you are being sufficiently transparent and accountable to the rest of your board and to your association. Okay, and then here's another example of an Excel type report. Okay, so then you want to present the financial reports at a meeting. It's a good idea either to provide copies to people who are attending the meeting so that they can look and see if they have any questions, or possibly if you are able to just project it on a screen so that everyone can see, that would be good. And in addition to presenting the report, then either the treasurer or the financial secretary should move to ratify any checks that were issued since the last association meeting. So that way you make sure that your association has kind of had a chance to review everything that you've spent. And then also at each meeting, then the treasurer or financial secretary should move to approve bills to be paid that you know are upcoming or that receipts have just recently been turned into you. And then here's a nice little script that kind of details everything. Since we're kind of short on time, I won't sit and read this to you. But if you're wondering how to present stuff, then this will give you some clues. Okay. So we just want to make sure that everyone is familiar with all of these basic points, even if you're not a financial officer. You want to make sure that at the beginning of your term that the budget has been approved by the association, not just the board, and that the funds are released as needed throughout the year, also at association meetings by the association. Okay, payment authorization forms are needed before you write a check, and they need to be signed off by the president and the secretary. The president, because the president is basically responsible for everything that your PTA does, and then the secretary, because the secretary, you want to make sure that the secretary has record of the approval in the minutes. All checks require 2 signatures, and not just any 2 signatures. It has to be from people who are approved in your bylaws. Check verification form is needed for all checks and cash given to the PTA, and you need 2 signers on that. And then actually on the cash verification forms, so the two people that count are going to sign, and then there's a section on the left for when they hand it off to either the treasurer or the financial secretary, whoever's taking it to the bank, and that person will verify the amount of that deposit and sign off on that, so that there's record of sort of who's been in possession of the funds throughout that whole time. And one thing that would be good is the counters should be taking pictures or making a copy of that cash verification form once it's been signed by the counters, and then also by the person that they're handing it off to. And then really you need to be keeping on top of your stuff so that you're giving reports at all of your executive board meetings and all of your association meetings. Okay. And look, question time.
There was a question, if the bylaws do not include the use of PayPal, is it illegal to use for any financial transactions for the unit? And what I understand and what I was doing this year, maybe a good example, is we were going to start using the online store with PTA Easy, which requires a PayPal account. So we made a presentation to the board asking that we install this online store with PTA Easy and establish a PayPal account. And that board recommendation went to the association. So there was approval by the association to set up the PayPal account. Lena would know better about the bylaws. It may be something that could be put in standing rules, but I defer.
Is the question asking about just PayPal as a way of receiving funds, or?
Yes, it can only be used for receiving funds. You cannot disperse funds from it.
Right.
That's not allowed.
Okay, I was getting the sense that that's what the question was asking about dispersing.
Okay. All right.
But
No,
I
it
don't
doesn't.
know.
It doesn't say. It just
Okay.
says for any financial transaction.
Yeah.
The bylaws don't. It is a standing rule. You could put that in your standing rules, or it would be just a order of business to be approved by the association every year, because there is expenses incurred with PayPal and Square, etc. So those expenses do need to be approved and made clear to the association that this is how the board wants to handle their collection of money. But we never disperse through monies through PayPal. Disbursements are always made with two signatures in the form of a check. There are some electronic fund transfers, but you still have to have a check authorization prepared and completed and signed. And then the association has to allow the electronic funds transfer. I didn't see any. Oh, there was a question about electronic transfers like Totem. Those are deposits to your bank account. That again is another business. That's not the right word, but that's another system of membership collection that needs to be approved by your association. And those are just straight deposits to your bank account of your units. Help me with the words, Flora. The
yeah, this is the
Units
e-commerce. This is the e-commerce we were talking about, where you have Square and everything. And so the net will be posted to your bank account. For example, $73.50 would post it to the bank. You need to post on your records $75 gross sales income, and then $1.50 as a fee expense. So you're just not posting $73.50 to, let's say, Spiritware. You're posting the $75 to Spiritware income and $1.50 as an operating expense, the fee to process that. And any kind of bank adjustments need to be processed. In PTA, my PTEZ is processed through a balance adjustment. But if you use any kind of financial software, they used to be called journal entries in my day, but any kind of journal entries or balance adjustments, it wouldn't go through the receipts or disbursements. It would be like a journal entry or balance adjustment.
Okay, are there any other questions pertaining to reports and presentation of reports?
No, but we still have to answer the question if there's time that was asked about categorization of the events, HSA, reflections, scholarships, etc. How one sets up the ledger is appears to be, well, I know it is a big issue for a lot of units that are trying to do things the right way.
Mhm.
And that we can either talk about it tonight or we'll talk about it in detail tomorrow night in advance. But probably we can see if we have enough time tonight, because I think it's pretty important.
Okay, so then we're talking about how to categorize the income and the expenses.
Yes.
Okay, so was there any, in the question, was there any sense of whether they're using the green book or?
I don't know that it truly matters, because you set up your accounts in my PTEZ the same as you might. It just says, please advise in which column HSA, reflections, and scholarships fall under: program, student services, organizational.
So student
So,
services actually generally are programs, if I'm not mistaken, right?
um, yeah. As far as the unit annual treasure report, that is required, by 33rd district and required by the IRS as a 501c3. It's a requirement, but they just say annual report. So ours is the unit treasure annual report. I set up, personally, and I think it's good because you only have to do the work once instead of twice. I set up the ledger, the green ledger, the tax categories according to that report. And so you only need to transfer from the ledger report to we call it UTAR, just one by one. Because any tax preparer that's worth his salt, you can give that ledger report to them and they can prepare your taxes. You shouldn't have to do anything additional. They should figure that out. And the ledger report, if you have a financial system that transactions are already recorded, just put in your account balances. You don't have to re-input each transaction into the ledger. You can say Carnival income, there's an amount. It doesn't have to be a receipt by receipt by receipt. So you just use your account balances and that would be a lot easier also.
So maybe once we get to the year-end stuff and we're up against the annual financial report where it kind of shows the breakdown, because I think when we send that out, isn't there a little description of what's considered a program, what's considered a fundraiser, what's, how you need to split up the membership dues. So
right.
Maybe we can go into it a little more.
Mm-hmm. Are you ready for your next poll, Lisa?
I am. Sure.
Okay. So looks like we have about 75 people or so. I'm going to launch the poll. We're going to give you maybe around, 20, 25 seconds to complete it. It's easy, but anyway, I just want everybody to get ready. It's going to come on the screen now. It's 71 participants. Excellent. I'm going a little over.
Okay.
Okay. looks like those that are going to complete it have completed it, about 85% of you. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Or we're almost at 90%. All right, I'm ending it. This is just for informational purposes for tonight. 75% of you know how to reconcile a checkbook and ledger to a bank statement. That's excellent. We are here to help the other 25. And there's a petty cash. You know, the answer is no petty cash. You can't have we'll talk about that, but there is no petty cash in PTA. And yeah, everybody's tax filings I think make me nervous as well. So thanks for everybody's honesty on that one. Oh, sorry, I didn't share results. I'm here sitting here talking about it. There we go. Okay.
So actually, Lena, do you want to do a quick talk about bank reconciliation then?
Sure.
Sorry to spring this on you.
No, that's fine. It is very important that you reconcile your bank account every month, and not just your checking account, but your savings account if you have one, your PayPal account. You know, what else am I forgetting, Flora?
Maybe if you have a separate one for e-commerce or Totem.
Your e-commerce account, you must reconcile. For those of us that audit books, I will tell you that's probably one of the most common problems units get into, is they don't truly know how much is in their bank account because they have forgotten. There are several uncleared checks, several checks that have been written, given to the recipient, and they've never gotten to the bank. And I did have a unit that had thousands of dollars in uncleared checks, and you never want to have that happen. You always want to know, because again, this is not your personal money, this is your association's money. So you always want to know that you know exactly how much is in your bank, that deposits are getting made, that checks are clearing, and if they didn't clear, why? Was it lost? Did the dog eat it, etc.? So you want to take care of, and you can't just go by your bank statement. If you know have online viewing of your bank account or whatever, that is not your checkbook balance because of you know, uncleared transactions.
And I'm going to barge in right here and point out that I've actually seen treasurer's reports where they're basing it on the checks that have cleared the bank rather than the actual checks that they have written during any given period. So quite often your actual checkbook balance will not match what's in your bank statement because there will be things that are uncleared.
And also you'll need the bank statement in order to see all those transactions that's coming into the bank that you would not be aware of, like the Square and PayPal and all those deposits. And when you don't, I kind of like the bank statement because it's kind of like a third party that I've seen audits where errors have been brought forward 6 months or whatever because they had no idea that what they manually input into a treasury report was an error, because you can make errors, it's human error. So the bank reconciliation really keeps you on track and know what you have really, because it's from the bank and not from your manually input data.
Yes, just to touch base what they said, like I have met with a few units who, like when they did the treasury report, they were just including the checks that cleared on the report. You don't put your check that cleared, you put the checks that you were written, because that's going to give you the balance in your account. As they said previously, like it's not everything's going to be cleared for the month. So make sure in your report you're writing every check that you wrote for that month, even though it's cleared or not.
Okay, so we've done a lot of talking about the bank reconciliation. Hopefully, this little blurb that's on here will help. If after reviewing this, you still have problems understanding what you need to do in order to reconcile your balance, your checkbook balance, your ledger balance, your treasurer's report balances to your bank statement, please contact either your council financial team or you can contact us, and then we can kind of help walk you through it a little bit better than this might. Okay. As
There's a
for
question about stale dates, if you want to go through stale date,
okay.
that
Oh,
procedure.
I was going to answer that in the chat. I just am afraid Lisa may run out of time.
Oh, okay. Actually, Lena, is there a way to I'm still seeing the poll on my screen.
Oh,
Is there,
I thought
and so it's making it hard for me to,
is it gone?
no, it's weird.
Oh
Okay.
dear, sorry.
I was able to close the poll by just clicking the red close button myself. I don't know if that works for you.
Well, for me, because I'm sharing my screen, it's a little different. And so in order for me to close it, I think I have to stop sharing. So this poll window is sort of covering my,
Oh,
my screen. So
I will try to share the results and then stop sharing. Did that
okay.
work for you?
No, it didn't. That's so weird.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Do you
That's
want me
okay.
to?
You
Do
know
you
what?
want me to
I'm
pick it
just
up?
gonna,
Okay.
sorry, exit out. Just I'm closing this window and getting back in. Thank you. Alrighty. Okay, and then also that second item on our poll was about petty cash funds. That no, they are not allowed. And so if you happen to still have a petty cash fund around, although it may be at the school, and so there may be an issue with accessing it, then really you should redeposit it back to your bank account. Petty cash is a problem because there's not that paper trail that there is with the checks. So if you have a problem or a situation, let's say, where people can't afford to go buy stuff and get reimbursed, then you may consider either making an advance or maybe seeing if someone else can make those purchases. But you always want to be going through the payment authorization form double approval process, and not just having cash sitting around that people grab from in order to make purchases. Okay. Online banking, that is allowable, and in fact certain vendors actually would prefer that, but you still need to have that paperwork. You still need to have a purchase authorization form, and also what's the name of that form, Lena? The EFT approval form?
Electronic funds transfer.
Right. So again, it's allowable, but you do need to still go through the process of getting stuff approved at your association meeting or your board meeting, and then also taking care of the paperwork. Okay. And NSF, we did talk about this a little bit earlier, and we are kind of running low on time. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and email us. Our contact information is on at the beginning of the handout. And this shows you if you have a check that's balanced, that you actually deduct it from the income rather than counting it as an expense.
The NSF fee is an expense.
No, right. The NSF fee is an expense. The actual amount of that check that is not good is counted against your income, reduces your income. Okay, just some other things that you might want to watch out for. Watch out for stale dated checks. If you have a check that hasn't cleared and it's been 3, 4, 6 months, then you probably want to follow up on that and see if it was lost, if they decided, oh, they didn't really want the check, if they need a check reissued. But so stuff like stale data checks might make your auditor tear their hair out if if it's not properly accounted for. And make sure you have a policy on NSF checks and how you want to handle those. And then this last one is if you have both a financial secretary and a treasurer doing reports, you just want to figure out which report will contain information on any electronic deposits and bank interest. Okay. Oh,
Lisa, before we,
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
actually, I jumped the gun on a slide, but I wanted to go back to the monthly bank statement. It is a requirement. I am told by
Right.
CAPTA and by the insurance company that the monthly bank statements are reviewed by a non-check signer every month, that they need to review them and sign off that they have reviewed them, and then filed in the treasurer's books.
And so what would they be looking for specifically?
They're going to be looking for, did every check get written that cleared the bank have 2 signatures? Were there any ATM transactions? Does it look like these are reasonable expenses that had been taken care of in a meeting? I've gone blank for the rest.
Right. So they're not completing an actual audit, but just looking for just weird stuff like ATM withdrawals. That's a no-no. And so
Yeah.
just, and hopefully it's an officer that knows what's going on with your unit so that they would have a sense of, oh, is it appropriate for there to be a $500 check or not?
And also, if you look at your balance, if it doesn't relate, back to the treasurer's report or an idea of what you think the cash balance should be, if it's like, $500 and you're thinking there should be $5,000 in there, then that's an obvious red flag.
Alrighty.
There's a question about if the financial secretary can be the person to review the bank account if they're not a check signer. In the pure sense, yes, but I would probably say no, because the financial secretary should be, one of their job descriptions is that they're responsible for getting money into the bank. So if they are reviewing the bank statement and they're not getting the money into the bank, that would be kind of a conflict. So,
Right.
So your auditor would be ideal.
yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that. The auditor. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to kind of zip
Yes.
through because
Yes. Continue, and then we'll pick up questions at the end.
Okay, so audits, there should be an audit done twice a year. This most recent one should cover January through June 2020. Some of the links that we shared at the very beginning of the chat have a link to the audit report and the audit checklist. Make sure that you are using the new ones because they have recently been updated to account for the fact that you may need a committee to review your audits. And I don't know if there's anything different on the checklist. Is there, Flora?
Yeah, there's quite a bit that's new. They didn't even have bank reconciliations on the checklist before.
Oh, okay.
And they're asking for more membership information. And yeah, there's quite a few changes.
Okay, so I actually recommend to all treasurers, even though you're not the auditor, to take a look at the audit checklist so that you know what your auditor is going to be looking for and that you can organize your books accordingly and be nice to your auditor. And then once the audit is completed for that period, then will be time for the treasurer to handle the annual financial report. And this is actually going to be the treasurer from the previous year, 2019, 2020, because they that's their work that is being reported on, so that they should do this report. And so there's a breakdown of program. Basically, this report is breaking down your income and your expenses into different categories. And the form that goes out from 33rd District to your councils and should be going to the units should have a description of what each of those categories means and what kind of things falls in each category. I don't know if that's going to answer that one question enough, Lena.
I'm sorry, was reading a chat. What was your question?
Whether the instructions that go out with the UTAR form, you think that would be sufficient to help people
For the unit, yes. We'll get it posted on our website.
Okay. Alrighty. Let's zip along. Okay, so some of you said that tax filings make you nervous. The beauty of it is that California State PTA has a tax information person that is really very helpful. And also they have a page on the website, which is helpful too. And so just want to point out a few things. Every PTA, actually every nonprofit organization, needs to file federal tax return, state tax return, RRF1. So if you go to the Tax Support Center on capta.org, then they'll have all this information here as far as which forms you need to file, whether you can file an e-postcard or whether you need to file a paper form. It has links to all the forms that you might need. And it kind of walks you through some of the stuff. And just to say that if you do make over $50,000 a year and are required to fill out either a Form 990EZ or Form 990, that paying for a tax preparer, that's a perfectly acceptable PTA expense, because we don't expect all volunteer treasurers to be tax experts. So just make sure that if you're looking for a tax preparer, that they know how to handle nonprofit filings. And we'll go in a little bit more into detail for tax filings in the advanced finance training tomorrow, but just want to make sure to bring up that, yes, it needs to be done every year. Because we're on a July 1st through June 30th tax year, all of the filings are due to the respective agencies, the IRS, the Franchise Tax Board, the Attorney General's office by November 15th, which is not to say wait until November to start working on them, but that's just to let you know that when it's due to them and when they start counting it as late. Well, one thing I wanted to point out for you returning officers is that the RRF1 form has changed slightly. There's an annotated version that's included here, and it's also on capta.org. And they have also a new accompanying form. If you file the e-postcard, if you make less than $50,000 a year, then here's another form that you'll need to file with. If you actually normally complete the 990EZ or the 990, then you would just send that along and you don't need to complete the CTTR1 form. Okay, and we'll go more into this at tomorrow's training. And Here's the web address at the bottom of this slide. Also, for those of you who have incorporated units, there's another form that needs to be filed once every 2 years. So you can check your bylaws to see if you have a corporation number, and you can look on here to see when the last time was that the form has been filed for your unit. And again, we can go more into this at tomorrow's training. Some final notes. For those of you who are financial officers, yes, you need to do sort of the recording and reporting of the expenses and the income, but really fiduciary responsibility is it's the responsibility of every PTA officer, which is why I applied those of you who are presidents and other officers who are here, because it's really helpful. It's a team effort, making sure that you're complying with all of the PTA policies as well as the government agency policies. Always remember that the PTA funds belong to the membership. They don't belong to the board. They don't belong to the treasurer or the president or the principal. And if you're in a situation where the principal is asking you to spend money, just fall back on our policies and procedures of, oh, is it a budgeted item? Oh, is this something that's been approved by the association? So even though you may be holding onto the checkbook, you don't have to be sort of the gatekeeper. You can put that responsibility back on the board and PTA policy. Members need to be completely informed about how the money is spent. So again, that's a part of being transparent and accountable to your members. And then members must be provided with the opportunity to approve business transactions. So that's part of the whole presenting the budget, having them release funds, and having them ratify checks after they've been issued. And really sort of the bottom line is that we want to be transparent, because if we're transparent and we have the association okay everything, then they know that PTA is acting responsibly and is being accountable and is honest and deserves to have a good reputation. And thank you for attending our workshop. Yay! Lena, did you want to throw the evaluation link?
Cindy's going to send the evaluation to
Oh,
everybody.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So yes, we'll be sending out a link to an evaluation form. So we'd greatly appreciate it if you could just fill that out, give us any feedback. It's useful, it's helpful to us so that we can make sure that we improve where we need improving. And yeah, anything else?
Well, what I was looking to see is if people in the participants, if they clicked on the participants window or the participants button, could you check yes or no if you plan on coming tomorrow night? And we'll try to get some of these questions answered. Like there was a question about if they normally need to file a 990 easy, but because of the COVID shutdown, looks like they're going to be under 50 grand.
Oh.
Can they go ahead and file the 990N? So, and I know we've just now hit 8 o'clock. It's not quite the bewitching hour, but if people want to go and sign off,
our feelings won't be hurt.
yeah. But I guess we could be around for a little bit to answer some questions. So Flora and Lisa, my tax filing people.
I would suggest to ask your tax accountant. I'm not sure if the 3-year average rule applies, if the last 2 years would still put this last year over the 50,000.
Mhm.
Like if you had 75, 80,000 last 2 years and 30,000 this last year, that would still be more than the 50,000 a year average for the last 3 years. So if there's a question, I would check with your tax accountant.
There was a question about, and I kind of wrote the question down, can supplies be bought on Amazon with a PTA card? And I said, no. All disbursements need to be made with 2 signatures on a check. There is no use of an ATM card for any disbursements. So if you discover, oh, well, last year's board got an ATM card, then that needs to be collected immediately and destroyed, and it needs to be noted in the minutes that it was collected and destroyed. The banks do issue ATM cards just as a matter of fact, or they might ask a board. And if you're new and you've gone to the bank to get new signatures and you don't know anything different, I use, ATM card at home, sure. You must deny the ATM card and not have the bank issue it. But if someone should discover that one was used, then it needs to be noted, like the auditor might find it, looking through the bank statements, and the card is collected and destroyed. And again, it's noted in the minutes. Did you see anything else, Flora, in the stream?
Just jumping in on the ATM.
I wanted to
Oh,
say about the ATM card for the card. I think there's a card you can get now. You can check with your bank that will just accept deposits, and that might be useful for people that don't want to go into the bank to make deposits. That there is a card, I think, that you
Yes.
can use at the ATM to just make deposits but not withdrawals.
True. And I don't see any more questions, Lisa. So I would like to thank everybody for coming. Thank you, Lisa, for great, and Joe for great beginning.
thank you.
I hope everybody comes back tomorrow, or reaches out to our contact information at the beginning of the slides. We're here to help you. We're here to make your life much easier.
And also that Flora has an audit workshop on Thursday
Yes.
also. So, and she's a wealth of knowledge. So you may
I
even
hope
pick
so.
up some stuff that's not audit related in that one.
Yeah.
So there were lots of questions about the UTAR, the Unit Treasurer's Annual Report. 33rd has created, and that we call it the UTAR, that's the acronym. It's on our website. We'd like to think that it might help you in collecting all your information and putting them in categories that will help you with your taxes, or at least if you need to have a tax preparer do that, will help you possibly save you money so they don't have to go through all your books. But it is not a required form, but you do have to have an annual financial report. In that form, in the one that CAPTA uses on the website, or if you use a software accounting system like MyPTEZ, you can do a budget versus actual. But that one, the downside to that is you may not have your categories organized as such to reflect your taxes. So you're going to have to go through an extra step. But it is completed once a year, not every 2. It's every year after your end of the year audit is completed. Then the treasurer completes the unit treasurer's report.
Also for taxes this year, ordinarily 50,000 or under, you wouldn't have to worry about the tax categories too much. You just do a postcard and you give a gross amount, and that was that. But now with the new Department of Justice, they have what they call the CTTR1 form. That's asking for detailed tax categories for under 50,000 and under. So it's more pertinent starting this year for the postcards people that they will need some of that detail.
I see someone has their hand raised. Ivana Sanchez, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Do you guys have like a reference sheet of accountants or tax people that we could reach out to, because we've had a lot of issues with our recent tax guy. So I don't know who to turn to be able to get our taxes done correctly or properly.
Well, we could actually not recommend anybody because PTAs aren't supposed to endorse anybody.
Okay.
But when you do contact, and you can just start contacting. So you're making over $50,000. That
Yes.
would require a 990 EZ. Okay. When you do start interviewing tax preparers, you need to make sure that they are very adept with, very knowledgeable with nonprofits,
Okay.
because we've found a lot of trouble has occurred when a tax preparer, oh yeah, I can do taxes, but they don't understand nonprofits, and it can get some people into.
And you may want to get ahead of time I want to say a service contract, but something in writing of their scope of work, how much they're going to charge, and turnaround time. Because I
Okay.
know a lot of people just drop off their
Okay.
stuff and hope for the best, and you shouldn't do that. You should have some sort of commitment of the price and turnaround time and what they actually will be doing.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and end this meeting. So thank you everybody for coming. I hope that we were able to provide some good information. And again, our contact information is on the sheet, the beginning of the handout. So you can always go ahead and contact us. All righty. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for
Thank
coming,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.